So you had just said you had no power since the night before at 7 p.m. And then silence. Like my entire house, my TV, my kitchen light, my dining room light. I'm pretty sure I had something in the dryer. My air cut off. Like the entire building. I'm pretty sure my entire complex might be out of power. And the complex doesn't know why. They have no idea. It's just out.
Out.
Okay. Yeah. So I was listening to your episode. You were talking about how your power was off until the night before at 7 p.m. and then my power cut off. I wish I could make this shit up. Wow.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up. And as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. And from this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to the Pacific Northwest, to the state of Washington, to talk with Mitzi. Mitzi, how you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm pretty good. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm also having a great day. The sun is out, and I'm getting to talk to a fresh person about fairy experiences. So I'm really excited to bring Mitzi on here tonight to get into that. Before we do, something I like to do at the top of the show, because you never know who's dropping in new, and a lot of people are continuously finding this show, is I like to just sort of set some of the ground rules for how the conversations flow over here at Fascinating Fae. So Mitzi, basically the first thing to say is that we're not here to convince anybody of anything. It's really not possible. I will say at this juncture, I'm totally convinced fairies are real. All the same, we're still not here to do that job. It's really not about that. So don't feel any pressure around, making people understand or believe this stuff. They will come to understanding and belief in their own time and space. The other thing I like to say is I do think it is really brave to talk about fairy experiences. So I think you're brave for being here. This subject matter can catch a lot of flack and vitriol online, especially. But here at Fascinating Fae, this is a supportive place to get into what actually happened in your own words without any rush. So with that note, basically what I like to ask my guests to do is to walk us into their fairy experiences chronologically, basically give as much context as is necessary. So, starting off with a little bit about yourself, Mitzi, and how, you've come to be in contact with the Fae, when that started, that kind of thing. And then just walk us through, some of the exciting stuff we talked about in our pre-conversation on Reddit, and whatever else you feel compelled to talk about here today, if you'd be so kind, please.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of memories for me to go through. Well, a little bit of background. I'm a mother. I used to work in harm reduction until I got burnt out. And then I worked in restaurants, and now I'm back in school. Um, I don't know. I've lived many lives. I've been an artist, I've been a musician, I've lived all up and down the West Coast. That's really all I can think of for my background right now without being too identifying about who I am. Um, I have a very different view of the Fae than many other people do, in that I'm not sure what they are, but I adhere to the view that there are many different types of beings. I believe they are pans-dimensional. I have no reason to believe this, I just do. And I think a lot of people call them fairies. I think people have different names for them. And I believe what I have seen have fallen under the term fairy. When I was a child was when I first started seeing them. And my dad actually saw them too. I never saw the pretty ones with wings. I saw more like you would see in uh like um like in West African folklore or Norwegian fairy tales. The gnarled, twisted little beings who are about like 2 feet tall with thick, leathery skin, who have an insanely inhuman presence around them. When I first started seeing them, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I would sometimes see them. I didn't see them all the time, only every once in a while. I would sometimes see them pass through the house, and they would be able to leave. This sounds so nutty, but they would be able to leave and enter through shadows and bends of light. And it was really weird. And one day I almost got like this understanding where I'm not even sure if I'm able to describe this right, but it was the like the idea of two different surfaces meeting allowed them an exit point. So that's the best way I can describe it. But I've had many different experiences over the years, uh, many times with other people, and I try not to pay too much attention to it now. But when I was a child, I noticed some would almost get angry if they noticed me noticing them. And I went to my dad, and my dad told me that they were demons and said, I don't believe they're demons, but I don't think they're good either. I think that idea of good and evil is outside the things I'm seeing. Um, but this I do believe. My dad told me the more you notice them, the more they will notice you back, and it brings focus on yourself. He said a lot of the stuff he told me when I was a kid is like a lot of what New Age people believe now about intention. And what's manifestation. It was a lot of things like that before the words were used, and you'd be like, it would be bringing intention upon myself. And it makes you like a beam, like a beacon, the more you focus on them, and not to do that. And so I kind of stuck with that. Now, I have many siblings. The other ones who have seen things, one is dead of an overdose, and he struggled with it his whole life. One would see different things than me, and this is something that would repeat itself in my life. A lot of times, people would see something different, not always, but would see something different than what I saw. One of my sisters, and she struggles with drugs, would see ghosts. She would think she was seeing ghosts. She would see something completely, utterly different. She would see like, the movie type of ghost with, like a see-through tall human person. That's not been what I've seen. And even when they've disguised themselves, there's been like a glowy light coming off of them.
Mitzi, may I ask you some questions about your earlier memories before we go any further, if that's okay with you?
Yes. Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, first of all, a lot of what you said is truly fascinating and is worthy of further questions. So that's why I wanted to pause. I really appreciate you taking the time and being so honest with everything that you've described, because it actually has a lot of fascinating insight for me and for the audience listening, I'm sure. First thing I just kind of want to comment on is that, when you start to notice them, for a fucking sure, they notice you back and shit ramps up. I'm convinced of that through my own experience of producing this show. So I will tell you, you're bang on with that. That's right. It's interesting how you're kind of breaking it down and correlating it to like what New Age people might call intention, or like, what's that book? There's a handful of them that come along every decade, it seems.
Yeah.
One of these books about like, basically your intentions make reality happen, more or less, is the gist. It's very difficult when a person actually starts to not just like, oh, ha ha, fairies, oh, ha ha ha, interdimensionals, but when someone actually starts to give this real consideration, it is truly remarkable to realize, like, okay, what you and I are calling fae or fairies, in my opinion, and I agree with you, is still a hard sell, hard word to exactly pin the tail on that donkey. But I do know I'm talking about real entities that are beyond my normal third dimensional quantum experience.
Exactly.
Like, you and I struggle in the same way to give this correct voice. You're in good company here at Fascinating Fae, because I'm not like I'm a 45-year-old straight white dude. I wake up sometimes, look in the mirror when I'm brushing my teeth, and I say, like, I'm hosting a podcast about fairies. What has happened to my life,
At least you're not hosting a podcast about the all meat diet.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm a vegan, so we could talk about that some other time. But, non sequiturs aside, veganism actually, I've been told through conversations with multiple people that are in direct contact with fairies beyond the veil, is the predominant diet of the Fae world. But again, non sequiturs aside. So these things are real. They definitely have a multitude of form. And I think that basically, like, every single thing ranging from little sparkly fairies all the way through to like orbs, ghosts, mantid aliens, and everything in between does exist, but largely is existing in a type of non-dimensionally aggregate way. Like, they're all there, but it's not all experienced at the same time, I guess is the best way that I could put it. But sometimes it is. And it would appear that like there's a type of interfacing between dimensional realities that we have access to because we can pick up on this stuff. We can see this stuff. Stuff can come into this reality and move around by the hands of these other entities who are not quite in this reality. So there's an interfacing between the two-dimensional planes. That's clear too, right? So there's a lot that you're saying that is actually bang on to the type of hypothesis and analysis that this show's been trying to give to the subject matter. So thank you for that. I just wanted to let you know that that's kind of like how we jam here at Fascinating Fae. The other thing I really want to ask about now, two things. They would come and go through breaks in the light and shadows, I think is how you said it. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's been decades and I still have a hard time explaining it. Okay, so imagine you take a picture of your room, right? And you're looking at it's not just breaks in the light and shadows, because it's not that they're disappearing and reappearing. And one day one had passed through. I was living in Oakland and one had passed through, and this guy I was dating at the time saw it too in its true form, and our dog saw it and screamed, and the guy I was dating flipped the fuck out. But at the time, I don't know if it was psychic or some random understanding of the world, but because it looked at me and it was shocked and it stood fully in the doorway for a second. And my ex had to leave the house at that point and didn't talk to me for a couple of days. But it was this understanding of, sorry, I'm kind of babbling, but if you took a picture of your room and like where a poster meets the wall, right? Or it's that little delineation of these are two different things meeting, or like it's like an idea. It's an idea of, okay, this comes back to our perception. Our perception of two different things at a place makes it two separate things. And because they're two separate, they can enter and exit because of our perception. Does that make any sense whatsoever? I've never, I've, I've, I've never been able to explain this. Like if you took a picture of your home and then cut out everything, like if you were going to make a collage of it and then put it back together, where you made the cuts is our perception of the world around us. And it's our perception that allows them through, whether we can perceive them or not. Because it's an ending and a beginning.
So one of my favorite things about talking to people that have really seen fairies is it's impossible to describe.
Yes. It's so impossible. Yeah.
How they move is impossible to describe. How they come and go is impossible to describe. And it is visually perceived, but it defies visual perception.
Yeah.
I think you're doing a really good job. If I may, I want to try to make sure that I'm understanding you to the best of my ability.
I'm not sure if I understand me, Jim, but go right ahead.
Well, Mitzi, talking about this subject matter is truly a mind bender. It really is. And one of my favorite things, I know I just said that a second ago, is how guests and even myself fumble to find the right words. But that is a hallmark of the truth of this subject matter. That's what I really think. Now, I have the benefit of having talked with 50 plus people at this point, and all I do is just think about fairies, the Fae, interdimensionals, and other such topic matter all day long. That's all I do pretty much. So I've heard other people describe in their own words more or less what you are talking about many times. I'll also say that a detail I didn't really share with you, which is kind of relevant about my own fairy encounter, not to talk about my own fairy encounter too much on your show, is this thing went right through the wheelhouse glass as though the window didn't exist. And it itself was so brightly illuminated that it gave off a degree of light that washed out any other visual distinction. So everything was just all of a sudden just this color of light. There was no steering wheel, there was no windows, there was no roof. It just was this light, So the Fae can do stuff that defies logic with the way that they come and go and how that they interact with what otherwise appears to be quote unquote reality. So I'm there with you. Now, just to go back to your own thing, like the visual cortex of the human brain is constantly filling in the gaps of what is actually being looked at.
Oh, yes.
Most of what you are looking at is the brain essentially remembering what was just there that it had looked at and playing that back in to save time and processing energy, basically. This is part of the reason why like magicians and sleight of hand can work and other optical tricks that move faster than the eye can perceive can work, et cetera, et cetera. But back to what you're talking about, I do think that like when you're looking out at the three-dimensional world, right? And you see like, okay, here's this white floor, and on this white floor is a black box, you know? There's a distinction in your visual processing between this is the black box, that's the white floor. And it's the space in between the two existing white floor and black box that these things come and go out of.
Exactly. Exactly.
I can say it back to you like that because other people have described it to me.
And it's not just that. I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's been random moments I've had of understanding when I've come into contact with these things. And one time I was in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and I had an experience, and I realized that it was reflecting my perceptions back at me, but not of what was really going on. And it made me think maybe that's why people see different things than me sometimes, is because, and it wasn't even like, it's not even like they pick and choose a thought from you to cloak themselves in. It's like a natural automatic thing they can do. And it's almost like you're glamoring yourself. You know, like if they don't want to be seen, they could just give off a vibe. And so you're glamoring yourself with your own perceptions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, listen, I love this conversation so much already, Mitzi. There's obviously like enough chronological eyewitness and experiential stuff that we could talk along your chronological timeline for a while, but let's just kind of keep this jumping around going on because we're actually talking about pretty interesting conceptual stuff that is totally relevant here. Okay, like, again, for the audience listening, I'm sorry that I've lost all credibility because I do basically at this point have, come on the record and through the episode process basically have demonstrated that I've had a lot of fairy stuff happen at my house or with guests or whatever. So when that stuff happens, sometimes I do get a weird imparted, almost psychic download of understanding.
Yes, that's what another different boyfriend. That's what he used to call it. Exactly. He would say they were downloads. Yes.
It's a proximity understanding transfer, which is totally weird to contemplate, but it does happen. And it is also a feedback loop of a type, Mitzi, because when you get focused on something or fascinated about something, that shit starts to present itself in material ways. And then when they give you that kind of imparted download, it can start to connect these fascination threads into like locked in, experientially confirmed understanding points, which is totally crazy to think about too, but it does flow that way. You get tripped out on it. They triple down and show you that your tripped out thinking is actually real. And then your whole perception of reality shifts and you're like, how did that all just happen in 5 seconds?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you're never the same. And you've now fundamentally changed your brain perception baseline to this new baseline, which is something many people that I have spoken to also relate to. And for me, I would say it's ongoing. I mean, it just doesn't fucking stop. I keep having my mind blown about their capacity, the way that they're functioning, but furthermore, they have this weird thing with time, and they know shit ahead us. And like, it's really, really beyond just, oh, I saw a thing that's from another dimension. The fact that they're from these other dimensions and that interface between our dimension and those dimensions I'm referring to earlier gives them a certain skill set or observer status over us that seems to be trippy to me. Like, they know a lot about us. They know about our hearts. We can hear back from them in those downloads instantaneously. It does lead me to believe there's something about, I'm actually trying to see, I'm the one rambling now.
No, it's fine.
But this does happen when you're trying to get all these kind of ideas together in a group. Responding to what you're saying about like people seeing different things, I want to ask some questions about that, but I think I'm kind of with you. Here's what I think is going on in part. I think that this is a weird thought that I struggle with all the time. I think I ask myself, are these fae, quote unquote, these fairies, us? Like, are they a reflection literally of ourselves in a sense? Both me, James, like I am like Petunia, the pixie I saw, is herself, but she's also me in the way that like we are all one in the Buddhist sense, but in a little bit more of a cause and reaction sort of sense too. Like, I do think that like there is an association between a person and the fae, in as much as I think that the fae is totally independent of that person. And it's a bit of a Pandora's box because both are true at the same time. They become associated with you, like you're saying. The more you notice them, the more they notice you. That kind of creates a feedback loop where they get a little bit stronger and you get a little bit more tripped out.
Mm-hmm. And then you get more focused on them and it just takes up too much time.
Yes, and unless you're lucky enough to have the privilege to basically do this full time like I do, you shove it down in a way because I got fucking taxes and bills to pay, and I got
exactly. Yeah.
So that's the benefit of the show, is that it can exist as these conversations that do let you go back there when you need to the understanding that's really true, because it is a mind fuck to realize there are interdimensionals that I can be in contact with that have special skills, and also I have to go vote for one of these two fucks, to run my country in a few months. It's totally on a whole other level that both of those things are happening at the same time. Bombs dropping and, basically gnomes moving glasses inside my house. It seems so confusing that the two are happening on the same earthly plane, but they are in fact. So, how do you reconcile it all? Most people just shove the one away and deal with what's in front of them, which is the daily realities. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you say people are seeing something different, I guess what I'm trying to say is I do think that like what a person may perceive an energy or interdimensional entity as physically looking like is where that part of ourselves is that kind of missing piece, like you're saying. Maybe that's why people in your life are seeing different things. But I wanted to ask a question about that specifically. When you say people are seeing different things, is this an event happening simultaneously in which people are seeing different things? Or are you referring to something more general, like in your home, you were seeing these Nordic kind of beings and other people were seeing ghosts?
Okay, like for instance, like Joey, this person I dated, this is the thing, if I stay around somebody long enough, they'll see something, but they're not used to it, so they'll focus on it all the time, so they'll see it more and more. But like Joey, we saw a fae. I call them beef jerky people sometimes, because some of them, not all of them, but some of them look like they have skin like Slim Jims, and they're like 2 feet tall. And that's but with like a really big head. And that's what I saw. But Joey, he saw a little girl in an old-fashioned dress in our home. That's what I'm talking about. Or like Danny in God, he attracted so much attention from them. It was these tall, thin, like like beings of light, you know? Like when he first saw them, he thought he was seeing it went now that was strange. That was strange. That day would take too long to explain, but Danny I was with for 10 years. He saw them in San Francisco and he saw them up here in Washington. But I saw these tall, thin beings of light that were following us. And it was really weird because this was in a public place and we almost never saw them in public. And nobody else could see them, but they were stepping around them. And they kept on walking closer and closer and looking at us. And Danny at first started getting freaked out because he saw like obese women in like really ugly clothes. And then all of a sudden it was like a switch flipped and it was like he saw the same thing I was seeing.
Okay, thank you for making that distinction, Mitzi. That's a really important distinction, that these are like simultaneously occurring events with altered perception or differentiated perception between both experiencers. Also, the finishing story there about how there was a switch flipping and then his perception matched is totally important and valuable to consider.
Because he was pointing right at her. He was pointing right at her, and I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden he was just like, we gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go. And we got in our car and left. So we're driving away. He was like, they were blah 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 blah. They're like, that wasn't a person. That wasn't a person. He's like, nobody else was noticing, and he's freaking out. I'm like, yeah, that's what I saw. That's what I saw. And there's always this thing where it's like, I don't say anything first because I don't want people to think I'm crazy, you know? So I felt, usually like with Joey's like, did you see that girl? Was that a ghost? What's that little girl doing in our house? And then I'm like, yeah, no, that was like a fairy. I don't know what that was. Then we get in an argument. What do you see? You know, what you saw this? No, it was this. But that time it was Danny was just looking around. I'm getting freaked out because I'm seeing several of these beings at once, which I've never seen before. And it was broad daylight and it was so freaky. And it was actually at a crowded gas station during the springtime. And one of those gas stations slash corner stores. And they're getting closer and he's staring at them too. And so I know it sounds screwed up, like I'm focusing on the wrong thing, but when we were driving away, I felt so validated that, okay, I don't have to have an argument. he's like, that woman turned in, you know, they turned into something else. What were they? They weren't human. So
it's really interesting to have a shared encounter. I had a shared encounter in my own experience, and it's very validating, like you are saying. I know that I would have not been able, sorry, let me rephrase that. I would have thought I had lost my mind and just not thought about what I saw if I hadn't had another person with me. Because I did have that other person with me, you receive that validation.
Oh yeah. A lot of people will just convince themselves too that they didn't see what they saw, you know? Like I mentioned to this before to you, like I had somebody literally stop being my friend. They stopped being my friend because they saw something when they were with me and they were like, we're never talking about this again. And it wasn't, yeah, because people think they're going crazy. And it makes me wonder how many people out there have seen something that they just don't talk about because it was healthier for them to decide that didn't happen, you know?
So my perspective is that most people, because these entities are real and the experiences of this interdimensional interfacing between our dimensional experience and theirs is continuous among, like, if there are billions of people, which there are billions of Fae by that logic. And so I'm sure that most people have something, like, it's interesting because I am constantly trying to prompt people to come forward. And you know, sometimes I'll get like somebody who's just like, I don't know if this counts or not. And they'll send me a long message about this time they lost a tiny screw when they were working on a really important project. And they dropped it behind the desk down a grate for the heater and it was gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they couldn't find this screw. They were trying to find it online, crying about it, only to come back into the room to find the screw like on the middle of the floor, right in the third floorboard, like right as they're going to walk in.
Oh, I love those stories. Or like how they'll come home and it'll be in the middle of the kitchen table. Yeah.
Yes, and I like when I first started to receive those stories, I wasn't sure, and then I talked to this woman Danielle, and stuff physically moved in my house. But it was really interesting because the people I talked to just before Danielle was this pair of women who hold a cross-country ferry forum, and the one woman, Bonnie, talks about how she always loses her glasses, and she's talked about the 3 or 4 times her glasses have been returned to the fruit bowl in the middle of her kitchen table, somewhere she never puts them. And like I was like, that's really weird. And then as I was thinking about how weird that was, what happens, my own glasses move in front of me while I'm taping an episode. That's what I mean. And you're right. When you start to notice it, it becomes more because the Fae are kind of like, hey, someone's noticing us. Fucking awesome. Like, we can be seen. And it's so individual too, because like you're saying as well, not to jumble all of our thoughts together here, but you're right about all this stuff. The Fae are individual, so some are nice and some aren't. Some are going to freak you out and some are going to make you feel great when you see them. And so to say that like there's any one reason why a Fae is going to interact with you is totally like too general to pin a tail on.
Right.
It's like, why does somebody want to talk with you? I don't know. Like
Could be a number of reasons.
Yeah, it's anything and everything. I mean, some people might want to murder you. Some might want to sell you something.
It could be the Fae equivalent of a child who wants to play. Yeah.
It could be all of that and more. And then throw into the fact that our weak perceptions infill, like I'm talking about, with what, like you're talking about as well, the different things that people experience may not be the true representation or the true form of that Fae, but it's very common in lots of real world scenarios that don't involve extra or interdimensional beings to have people who are all seeing real things report having seen something different. I mean, this is why eyewitness testimony is not usually relied on in court. So if you can all be looking at a real tree or a real car, and some people remember it was red and other people remember it was blue, it just shows you that perception can be very real to the person experiencing it, but the object being perceived may not be that actual form.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're talking about trying to look at something that is from another dimension, the brain is going to crack on first glance.
I think it was easier with me because I grew up around a really religious father, but his girlfriend practiced ancestral animism. So, and my dad believed in these different things. So from an early age, it was like, there are things that live beside you, just ignore them. So I think I'm kind of lucky in that sense.
You know what? I have totally talked with enough people that I can draw a distinction between the childhood home experience and perceptive abilities. Like, I talked to one man and his son. The father realized his son was having visions into the fairy realm and helped his son cultivate that. The result was that this kid, who's now a 29-year-old man, has the most complete dialogue about this other realm that I've ever heard. Because when he was a kid, his dad was like, oh, you're seeing this for real? Let me write down all of your diaries about it. Let me help you cultivate this skill set. That dad, later in an offline conversation, was like, yeah, I believe I'm a reincarnated dryad. Like, he believes he's a reincarnated tree fairy. Mm-hmm. And so that may be why he was able to help his son so much. But even just what you're talking about, like being in a home where your father is acknowledging them as real, acknowledging your experience of these things as a kid as real, that is going to be a cementing foundational part of your perception of reality. I do wonder this too, and I'm going to put this back to you here. Because of that way that you are, and I do think some people are stronger and locked into their perception than others because of circumstance or whatever. Do you think that that's why your partners start to be able to kind of like, are you rubbing off on them as the direct, closeness between you and the partner now kind of, is that why you think some of your partners are starting to see them too? I'm just curious what you think's going on there.
I have no idea. I have no idea. Usually, if I have like some sort of intuition on something, I'll explore that. But I've never figured that out because it's something that I don't focus on until usually somebody else does. Like if something will pop up, I'll just acknowledge it and move on with my life. But at literally everybody I've dated since I was a teenager, at some point they'll see something and then they'll see something more and more and more, and then it'll bring it back in my life. So I don't know if I'm subconsciously choosing people, but I don't know. Maybe I had this psychic in Seattle tell me that I have gravity, that my energy is denser, and so that affects people when they're around me too much. So maybe actually I just realized I've had two people say that. I had one woman, I had the psychic in Seattle say that when I was 38, and I had a psychic in Berkeley, California say that when I was 17. I never realized that till now, until talking about it, because I haven't talked about this with anyone. So maybe people are just affected by that. But then again, I could also just be subconsciously choosing people who are susceptible to that. But it's also, these are all people who have never had experiences like that before. So, and you and I were talking earlier about maybe there was an epigenetic factor, and a good half of the people I have dated have struggled with drug addiction, and they had these experiences. Sorry if it's a little loud. I gotta check my mail while I'm talking to you. Oh, I guess they didn't leave it at my front door. But a good half of them had these experiences while after they had gotten clean. So it's very interesting. And another thing with the genetics, and you were mentioning somebody who had a kid. My kid has had a couple of experiences. I don't try to influence him too much in that regard. I want him to explore that on his own, but he is very randomly intuitive, like very like he is somebody you don't lie to. Like he's real quiet. You lie to him, then he'll just mention later what the real truth is, but he picks up on stuff. He's had a couple of experiences, but I've had genetic testing done, and so has a lot of people in my family. Me, my son, and my dad, and my sibling, my brother who died. We all have what's called single nucleotide polymorphisms, which most people have, but a lot of times they don't do anything. Like if you misspell, oh, my computer. Okay. Like if you misspell a word, most people can tell what the word is, but sometimes you misspell it and it has a whole new meaning by just changing one word. And our DNA can be like that too. And we have a bunch of single nucleotide polymorphisms on the gene that encodes cytokines, so that affects our immune system. And then we all have, the ones who see this stuff, have a single nucleotide polymorphism on the gene that encodes oligodendrocytes, which in our brain, our neurons, the nerves in our brain, they're coated in something called a myelin sheath that's made out of lipids. And if it's thicker, then it's basically your thoughts go quicker because the energy goes faster through them. And the single nucleotide polymorphisms we have encode our oligodendrocytes, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that wrong, to make a thicker sheath than normal. And so I literally just found this out recently, and it's making me wonder if that's one of the reasons why not only we see these things, but we see them differently. It's because our brain is literally different.
You know what? One of the things that I talk extensively about on the show is quantum biology. And so picking up from what you're saying, there are many proven instances in the animal kingdom of like wet cells. Like for instance, an example that I'll give is the the European robin is able to see quantum entanglement of light particles.
What? I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's called the quantum robin. So basically, like in quantum physics, light, is breaking up into billions of potential like photon positions when it hits a tree leaf. That's quantum superpositioning in quantum biology. With birds, basically, like when the light is hitting the atmospheric barrier of Earth, the gravitational pull of Earth's poles is sufficient that it affects the photon. And so some photons, when they're coming off the sun and hitting the atmosphere, are kind of pulling to east, and some are pulling to west, some are pulling to
No
north,
way.
some are pulling to south, just a little. And the bird can actually see the difference between where this particle of light in its both positions is getting pulled.
That's amazing.
It's totally amazing. And that's how they can navigate through inclement weather, because they actually are looking at Earth's gravitational field with their eyes. As light comes in, they can see the quantum positioning of light pulling apart these different particle positions, and then they can see that. And so I think that humans also contain quantum biology. Well, actually, here's one for you that's a totally proven human one. This was discovered and confirmed in 2014 and is now basically in science books in the most recent publishing for schools. We smell with a quantum instrument in our nose. It was understood forever that particles of what you're smelling is how smell works. Here's some cinnamon. There's little tiny fragments of cinnamon as small as, particles. And those are entering your nose, and your nose is basically going yep, that's cinnamon, got it. But that's actually not what's happening. What's happening is that cinnamon, like any other item on Earth, it has a quantum assemblage made up of all these little quantum level assembled pieces. And everything in quantum physics, as you know, is not really solid. It's all vibrating.
Yeah.
So when you smell the cinnamon, you have actually a quantum computer in your nose that is listening to the vibration of the assemblage of the molecule of cinnamon.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's totally trippy. It's called the quantum nose. So there's the quantum nose, and then there's the quantum robin. But the quantum nose, just to finish off, when a person, for example, smells cyanide, that smells like almonds. And when they smell almonds, it smells like almonds. And that's trippy. But they were able to show that the vibrational frequency of what makes up an almond molecule and the vibrational frequency of what makes up a cyanide molecule, even though those two molecules are totally different assembles of bars and balls, right? The vibrational frequency of the two is identical, which is why when you smell cyanide or almonds like marzipan, they smell the same, because the molecules aren't smelling the same. The vibrational frequency of how they're assembled is the same pitch, basically.
Oh, wow. That gives me a lot to think about.
Yeah, so everything you smell, and people talk about having these quote unquote phantom smells, I smell a deceased loved one's perfume, for example.
Okay, hold up though. This is gonna sound mad crazy. If somebody's thinking about me too hard, this has got to be the lamest superpower in the world. If somebody's thinking about me too hard, I can smell what they're smelling.
Okay, so let's consider the quantum robin who's seeing the quantum entangled particles of light. Let's consider quantum entanglement being like the Buddhist answer, we are all one. Mm-hmm. So the smell itself is really just vibration. It's not a smell of a molecule. So
if quantum entanglement, then if I'm entangled with somebody, of course I'm going to pick up on their vibrations.
Bingo. And this is why someone you love dies and you feel it and you bolt up in the middle of the night and you know they're dead, even though you have no way of knowing that.
That happened with my child's father, actually. We hadn't been together for a couple of years, and I knew the minute he was dead. Interestingly enough, though, my kid, who really just randomly gets psychic bursts, his grandma cremated his dad without telling us she was going to do that. And he told me, he said, my dad is ashes. I'm like, what? He's like, my dad is ashes. Go and contact my almost mother-in-law. She had cremated my child's father without letting us know she was going to do that.
I do think that like everything we're talking about, as jumbled as it might initially appear, is actually right along a very clean line.
I think they're all connected too. Yeah.
I do think. And I think that like to see a fairy is an existential gift and crisis, because it then opens up the Pandora's box of, well, what am I? What is reality? What is the nature of this all? You know, we're a physical thing. That's undeniable. I poop every day. I have to eat. I have to drink water. I know that I'm physical. But like you're saying, the lamest superpower ever, by the way, that's awesome. We are all of us, walking around with these quote unquote lame superpowers where we can actually smell the vibration of molecules by listening with a quantum computer, not actually smelling at all. We can all basically, through love or through hate, become deeply interlinked with one another at a soul level, to the point where I think what you're saying is true. You can smell what someone who's thinking about you too much is smelling. Like quantum entanglement is not a conceptual thing, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
This brings me back to what I said kind of at the beginning of our conversation, where I wonder to what extent these Fae are ourselves, because I do wonder to what extent the lived experience of being a solo human being is just an illusion anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I think, oh, these are definitely like their own entities. It's Bob or Sally the fairy. But then I kind of think like, well, if that's true, why does it feel to me anyway like they need me as much as I need them in order for it to have happened, if that makes any sense? So I don't really know how else to put it, but there's something I will never be able to quite nail. But I do think that like, I'm not saying they're a delusional reflection of ourselves. I'm not saying, oh yeah, the explanation for every interdimensional or every entity is that it's just a projection of ourselves. But in the way that we're talking about being linked to a person becomes where you and that person are kind of one on some level anyway, you know. The deeper the connection, the more that's true. Especially like in a romantic relationship, many of us can understand that experience happens. Is that a conceptual thing, or is that a real occurrence? You know, it's hard to say. If this is all just moving energy, what is actually physically touching you and what is actually getting into you may have no real blurred line, in my opinion. So, but again, just speculating, and there's no right answers or wrong answers in this fairy debate.
Yeah. I've always kind of felt like there is so much more going on in the world around us that people aren't aware of. And it's better they're not aware, because I think if people could see everything that was happening, then they'd stop caring. Then we mentioned this earlier, bills and all that stuff. I think they'd stop caring about bills. I think they'd stop caring about taking care of each other. I think it would be such a shock that it would be hard for people to balance, I guess, like the unseen world with the seen.
I know this to be true just in my own lived experience. There's been moments where I've like said, I'm shutting this fucking show down. I can't have this stuff happening in my life anymore. I'm trying to deal with a legal matter on the real side of my life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I get so into this, I can't go to sleep because like, oh my God, like I just watched my glasses move. Like what the fuck is going on? And how do you come down from something like that?
See, because I'm not trying to live like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, that's a really important point. And actually, like one of the things I try to weave into these episodes as much as possible is, yes, this is Fascinating Fae. Yes, these episodes can be kind of exciting. Like a lot of people, when they're done listening to this, are going to feel like that kind of giddy feeling that you get when you're done talking about all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's about finding a way to put that into its correct contextual place so that you maintain a degree of sanity in the perception of others, so that you can continue to live these experiences and not have them take over. And actually, like, I mean, I personally have suffered from drug addiction. I've been open about that on the show. You have dealt with many people that are, able to say the same, and have had family members that are able to say the same. Part of the thing that can happen is if you're very sensitive and you are aware to all this stuff, it can make it very difficult to live your normal life.
Oh, yes. I think that's what happened to my siblings, to be perfectly honest. I think my brother who died, I think he was too tapped in and he struggled with it his whole life.
It's my best friend whose music I feature in all these episodes took his own life for a very similar storyline. Like, exceptionally talented person, very capable speaker. That thing you talked about gravity, I feel that with you. I can sense that you do have a kind of likable gravity, confidence, kind of imparting thing about you. I can see why people want to be around you and with you. DK was the same way. His band was super popular. His environmental efforts were super popular, but he was continuously living the dual perception of the real world and the world beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, he couldn't reconcile the two. The real world was making him very sad, and the world beyond, for whatever reason, held more comfort for him. And that's a really difficult thing to see a person go through, and the ramifications and the impact of that on his family, his community, and everyone down the line, still to this day, is, huge, as I'm sure it is with your siblings who have passed as well. And so I give my condolences and my empathy for that, because all of us listening and these people that we're talking about are beloved fallen. This is the struggle. It is a magical world and a shitty world, and you have to live in the shitty one most of the time, basically. So, there's a lot of value in these conversations, but let's always be reminded that they're only able to be had in a place of privilege where you're stable enough to let your mind go there in the first place, basically.
Plus, it's something that can always be used against you, Like, my ex who died, Danny, who I mentioned, me and him had a lot of experiences together, and we broke up on bad terms, and he relapsed and he started using drugs again. And his mother and his aunt wanted custody of my kid, and they tried to use, Danny had shared our experiences with them, and they tried to paint me as crazy. And luckily, it never even got to a chance of going to court, because we live in different states and you can't just take somebody's child without evidence. But just the fact that it was something that was going to be tried to be used against me, I had to prepare for that. I had to prepare to be able to lie, to deny everything, So, and there was a point in my life where I never lied for self-preservation. It never even occurred to me. And I had to learn to lie for self-preservation so that these things could never be used against me. And I wish there were metaphysical support groups, because there are so many people who stuff like that is eating at them, or they forget about it until they get drunk, or they think maybe they're crazy, or they think maybe they're schizophrenic. And the reality is, sharing these things could cost them their job, their friends, their relationships. It's something that somebody was planning to use against me to take my child from me. And my child is, from the minute I was pregnant with my child, like, I knew my child was special. Not special like they're going to rule the world one day. I just, I loved my kid. That would have destroyed me if he would have been taken away. And these are things people fear. Even if they don't consciously fear it, everybody knows that if you say you witnessed something like this, that it could harm your life. So,
Mitzi, this is why I say I think it's brave for people to tell me their stories. I don't just say that as a platitude. I do really believe that, because everything you're saying is about as true as it gets around this subject matter. And so, your anonymous nature is assured here. I can promise you that, as is anybody who wishes to come forward. I do the heavy lifting by putting my full name, my links to my LinkedIn, my business background. I say, like, this is me. You can, like, in a way, philosophically, part of what I'm trying to do on this show is to jump on the grenade for everyone who's a guest for me.
I appreciate that. It's nice to know that there is an outlet out there.
Yeah, because I'm a public figure in my own community. I ran my dispensaries and was in the newspaper easily 30 times over the past 5 years leading up to cannabis legalization. I was basically one of the people that helped do that. That required me to constantly be under public scrutiny by the police, by legislators, by Health Canada, by the tax authority. I weathered all of those storms, made it in part, my small part, that cannabis is now legalized in this country. And I sold millions of dollars of marijuana against the law and never did a moment of jail time. Because if you are right about something and it's true, and you do it in a bold and strong way with a lot of courage and confidence, you can move that needle. Basically, I'm just trying to lend my former credibility from those efforts to this topic with hosting this show and saying, I'm James Whitehead. I'm the guy who ran Medijuana. I'm the guy who did Seaquarium Shame, the protest against whale watching. Look me up. Here's all my stuff. Those other efforts also prepared me for people hating on me. Because, I was told, oh, you're giving marginalized people more drugs. You're not a doctor. You're not a healthcare professional. How do you think you can help people? I got that all the time. And then with the whale watching thing, I got, oh, it must be nice to have enough money to have an art boat and, the time to care about such a frivolous, eco topic. And then also just like, oh, who does this guy think he is? Like all in all, I've heard it all with my previous public advocacy. And so I'm ready for it with regards to Fascinating Fae, but most individual people are not. And so it is brave for people to come on the show. And that's why I always say it, because it's just like, well, who else do you tell? Where else do you go to get taken seriously? And, again, I'm not an expert, so you're not coming here for any expert opinion. You're just coming here to talk openly about what is going on, because this stuff is real. So, okay. And we're back. So, what I'd like to do out of respect for your time and respect for the audience's time is, first of all, just thank you for this conversation so far. I've really enjoyed this conversation, I gotta say. You're quite intelligent and very nice to talk to you about this. And you've given me a lot of really good insights that, honestly, not a lot of people have been able to put voice to. I think you really understand this stuff well. So thank you for being here and doing that with us here tonight. I want to ask a couple of questions about the appearance of these sort of 2-foot tall beef jerky looking people. So tell me as much as you can, I guess, about what they look like. I know we've got the kind of the gist. Were there any clothing that you can remember? Anything that really stands out? Just kind of go tip to toe with what you can recall about them that might be interesting to learn about, because again, so few people get a good look at these things.
I've seen several different types, but what I call the beef jerky people are the most prominent. If you've ever eaten a Slim Jim, the texture, their skin looks like the texture of a Slim Jim. It looks like it would feel the same as a Slim Jim, but it's a lighter shade of brown. And I'd say between 2 and 3 feet tall, and their heads look a little bit oversized. No clothes. I can't remember if they had genitalia. They did not have breasts, but I've seen them several times. Well, actually more than several times. They are the type of fae I've seen the most. Now the David the gnome type of fairy or like the Norwegian type of fairy, like with their body type, which is more human, but they're small. I've also seen beef jerky people with that type of body type too, but still no clothes and no hair. Big eyes, big eyes. Um, thin lips. Yeah, they're the ones I've seen the most. And they're oh, that was the type where it's I've had other people see that type with me, but I've also had people see that type and see something else. Like when I was saying my friend saw a little girl in an old-fashioned dress. Thought it was like a At first thought it was like a little girl in our home and then thought it was a little girl ghost. So
It's really interesting that you're getting the benefit of like, well, I shouldn't say benefit, but you're getting the experience of watching other people perceive them on more than one occasion. That's actually really interesting in and of itself because it lends so much validity to what you're experiencing, but it also basically opens up as many questions as it as it answers. You know what I mean? Which is like,
yes.
well, what is that trigger that allows a normally non-perceptive person to enter the perceptive state?
Maybe vibration, like could be what you were talking about, quantum entanglement, vibration,
You ever walk into a room where two people just had a fight?
Yes, and you can feel it.
You can feel it. So, like this is a bad example, but I did date at one point a woman who, prior to dating me, was very square. Like, had never smoked a joint, never done mushrooms, never really done anything. You know what I mean? Just very square. Came from a very conservative Christian household, 5 siblings, very like calls her mom and dad twice a week, just like this kind of person, right? And through dating me, just through that proximity effect, right? Fast forward now, this person has totally dropped all religion, has a total new path. But it wasn't because I like gave that person that path. They just saw how I was living my life, and they were like, oh. And then, through that permission or through the energy of just being around me, whatever you want to call it, a profound change did occur in this woman's life, which she thanks me for all the time and I take no credit for. But, I do think that there's something about closeness with another that gives you some of that person's stuff. It's probably true that, because another thing too is like this show even, I've had a number of people say, oh, I've like been listening to this show and I'm on episode 25, and all of a sudden they're frantically writing me multiple messages telling me about all the weird stuff going on in their house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's not my fault. Like, it's like everything we're talking about. Are they us? Does paying attention to them make them stronger? Is it a feedback loop? What is it? I don't know, but this show is having that effect on a lot of people. So,
It's a vector for phase, man.
It totally is. It totally is. There's one in particular, Grimble Grumble, who's like hitchhiking on the MP3s and exploring the world and fucking with people every time they listen to episodes with him in it. It's just so weird. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's very interesting. I've never considered that, but yeah, it's definitely infectious. I've experienced it, but I've never analyzed it that much.
I would go so far as to say it exists in the podcast recordings. This recording itself is another example of it, and everyone listening is going to catch a little bit of that wave. And so, unfortunately, the Fascinating Fae project is making fairy stuff happen more all around the place.
Well, then I'm glad I didn't talk about my negative experiences. Oh my goodness. Well, I might save that for another day. Yeah.
I was going to say, this has been such an interesting and rich conversation. I just want to have you back sometime.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. If you do, I will try not to jump around so much.
It's all good. Free associations are usually one of the things I say in my intro. I say, we like to go chronologically, free associations aside. And so free associations are always totally permitted in Fascinating Fae conversations. I think we did just fine here today. I'll tell you what, one of the things I like to do as I move towards wrapping my conversations with people up, Mitzi, is I ask, some questions usually towards the end to everybody that comes on the show. Would it be cool with you if I kind of move us towards the conclusion phase of this conversation?
Oh, definitely.
I just do it out of respect for your time and the audience's time more than anything. I could literally just keep talking with you. I'm fascinated and enjoying this conversation quite a bit. But, well, here we go. This is the thing I like to ask everybody that comes on the show. And, kind of like at the intro, this one needs a bit of caveats too before I get to the question. So I like to say this. There's obviously nobody out there that has a fairy in a jar on their countertop that they're studying. So there's no right answer or wrong answer to this question. It's really just about giving you a chance to, say what you think in one place with all your thoughts and feelings intact in one place. The question is deceptively simple, but here it is. I'm just wondering, Mitzi, what do you think that fairies are?
I think fairies are pans-dimensional beings, and I think there are multiple different types of them. I've talked about the beef jerky people, but I've experienced other types too, who are radically different. That's all I know. That's all I know. I believe they're pans-dimensional beings. That is it. Oh, and I believe every culture has their own interpretation of them, and I think people see them all the time and think they're human because they're able to reflect perception back so that people don't see them. Other than that, I have no idea what they are. I think most of the ones I've seen have been, they're not good or bad. They just are. I've experienced a couple that might have been termed evil. I don't know what their motivations are. I don't know what they're doing. Most of the time I don't talk to them. I've only experienced talking to them once. I don't know. And I've learned to be okay with not knowing, because when I try to figure it out, and I spend too much time on research, and I've got a lot to get done in my life. So
That answer comes from someone who's really aware of this for real, because that's all basically how I feel, as much as you've just said it for me. So thanks for that. Yeah, I don't know either. I'm the host of this show and I don't know. I really don't know. The more I think I know, the less I have a clue. So
right?
Congratulations, Faye. You're living up to your name as hard to understand and moving in mysterious ways. Because yeah, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah, right.
What the fuck is Grimble Grumble's agenda? I don't understand. But he's like basically using his skills of moving through time and space to do the most unbelievable stuff. You're right that they can show up as people. I've come to accept that. That is a truth thing. I most recently published an episode, Mitzi, where at the start of the episode, I'm talking with a guest and he's talking about a fairy from his childhood. And out of nowhere, this man shows up at my open door bleeding. And I won't ruin it for you because what he says is totally unbelievable. I have it all on audio. But he basically is trying to convince me to come out of my house, which I eventually decide to do, only to come outside and find that he has totally disappeared. There is no blood. And where he should be are two very pretty French girls asking for directions from my neighbor. I then ask the three of them, these two pretty French girls and the neighbor, did you just see this bloody guy that was having a screaming conversation with? And they look at me like, what? No. They're 15 feet from where this just fucking happened 5 seconds ago. How the hell do they not know what I'm talking about? Am I losing my mind, only to come back in and go like, no, I got that son of a bitch Faye on my fucking recorder. And sure enough, I do. So yes, they can show up as people and you might not realize it. Actually, that is maybe happening more than I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. And then something you talking about that made me think about how there's always traditional rules with the Fae. whether it's the tricksters of West Africa or it's the Fae of Ireland, where can I come in? Can you come outside? Can you do me a favor? Can I do this? And they have their own little set of rules regarding that and their interaction. And it made me think, I've had very, I have had experiences like that, but very, very limited. And I think of that as I think of like your experience right there with the Bloody Man as the fairy tale Fae, because that right there, it seems like they're going by a set of rules that only they understand. And it's by engaging with them, you're agreeing to rules of engagement that you're not aware of.
Furthermore, this guy had long, stringy hair completely covering his face, and at one point says to me, "Will you just come outside and look at my face," while not showing me his face.
Yes, exactly. So what does that even mean right there? How would you understand the psychology of a rabbit? You don't, because they're a completely different creature. So it's like, so situations like that, like, it just gives you more questions. But I got a question for you. Was the vibe any different around this guy? Did he seem completely human? Did in retrospect it was different?
Oh, he was not right. No, he was not right. Even when you hear him, his vocal cord it just isn't right. Like, he's got a voice, but it doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because the guy I'm talking to, that I'm interviewing, he's describing channeling a frog person. And he says, "I think that frog was a fae." And the second the words fae leave his mouth, this guy is immediately at my door.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes like this. He goes, "Excuse me."
Oh, no.
Like a frog person would.
Yes.
And then I jump up and I'm like, what? I'm not expecting anyone at my door. And he's like, it's kind of an emergency right now. And I say to him, "What's the emergency?" "No emergency inside my house. Like, what the fuck is going on?" And then he's like, will you just come outside and look at my face right now?" While he's not showing me his face. He sounded weird. He was behaving weird. He was bleeding and there was no blood on the ground. You're asking me, was this guy a weird guy? Yeah, Mitzi. It was, everything about this fucking dude was off. Not the least of which is that he disappeared and effectively turned into two pretty French girls in the 2 seconds I lost eye contact with him.
I feel like this is a dumb question to ask because I don't understand. But do you have any idea what that was about?
Well, to properly answer that question, for everyone listening, go back and listen to this whole catalog. But the gist of it is like this. Somewhere around the mid-30s, I talked to a woman from the UK who captured a gnome on her Ring camera for real. And that episode was so captivating to me that I was like focusing on editing it right away. And while I was doing that, weird stuff happened with my computer and my phone that essentially, just to condense the information down to a nugget, introduced this gnome by name to me as having just arrived at my computer. And then this gnome has gone on to do the most incredible things throughout the podcast episodes after it was introduced. It stole the telephone charger out of the pocket of a guy who was going to talk to me and brought it back to his house when he was camping, only so that this guy would talk about it and again refer to the gnome. That's one thing. Then I talked to a woman from the UK who pulled tarot cards. He then put the tarot cards physically back in the box. She pulled them out, had them on the cushion in front of her, was reading them to me, and he changed them in front of her very eyes, making the cards that were out of the box disappear, be buried back in the box, and 3 totally brand new cards appear in front of her very eyes while we're talking. And all of this was like culminating in this ramping up of the gnome transitioning from two-dimensional, flat as a sticker, holographic representation of gnome energy captured on Jem's Ring camera, all the way through to him showing up at my house, staff in hand, as a faceless man when he was having a fight for supremacy over who gets talked about on this podcast the most between him and Petunia, the purple pixie that I saw. That's a whole fucking mouthful. But what I think happened is this. I think he was practicing showing up as a full-body person. And one of the things about this guy, Grimble Grumble, is he likes to interrupt my audio whenever he wants to. It's his calling card. And so he was first interrupting my audio by like turfing technological sides of the conversation, like making recording software not work or making internet connections not work. And he eventually figured out like, oh, there's enough liminality going on with James in this show that I can hitchhike, hijack, or like ride on that lightning bolt, whatever you want to call it. Now it's at the point where like that full body manifestation of the frogman, I think again was a flex by Grimble Grumble. That was the first time he showed up as a full body person. He then showed up again in a much more dramatic fashion several days later. All of this that I'm trying to kind of articulate happens over a 9-episode arc, you know, encompassing like 20 hours of audio. But basically,
I don't want to listen to it because I don't want him manifesting in my life.
Well, this is the problem, is many people that have been listening to this Grimble Grumble stuff have then gone on to have him manifesting in your life, in their life. And I'm just going to put it out there, and I'm sorry to say, I'm pretty sure that's who knocked over all that stuff at the grocery store.
Ooh.
And the reason I think that is because he sent me the calling card of multiplying my audio settings before we spoke.
Yes.
And he does that when he has done something that the guest is now going to be talking about.
Oh.
Does that resonate with you at all?
Yes, no, actually, that does. That does.
Mm-hmm.
I got a quick question. When you saw him the second time, though, did you see his face?
No, because the second time he showed up, he had a staff in hand, and his face was completely covered in what would be analogous to like a super hardcore methamphetamine junkie who had picked every part of his skin off.
Uh-huh.
And so he had lips, eyes, and everything else was basically broken and engorged red,
Oh, that's
puffy
horrifying.
skin. It was terrifying, yeah. And bright white smile, otherwise normal clothes, carrying a staff that looks like a wizard staff. And again, this is just like, I kind of do want you to listen so that I make more sense at the tail end of this episode, but it keeps going on. So that happens. He shows up in the morning. Man, there's so many details that I'm omitting that probably could take 5 hours to put in, but I'll try to do this a little bit of justice by condensing it to answer your question. So you're asking me, why do I think that faceless bloody man was there? The short version to tie it all together is, I think a gnome named Grimble Grumble's been growing stronger around this show, and that was the first time he showed up. The second time he showed up with no face, he has this staff in his hand, and he showed up in the really weird way where I woke up from a dream, went outside to reenact what I had just woken up from, heard a voice behind me, turned around to see this man having suddenly appeared, and he says to me, "How's it going? Weird, hey?" And I turn to look at him this is the first thing he says to me, "How's it going? Weird, hey?" And I look at him and I say, "Man, where did you just come from right now?" And he laughs at me and walks off. And I live next to a waterfall and a bridge, so he walks off across that bridge. Now, totally unbeknownst to me, right? I'm planning on talking to a woman from Australia who's a fairy artist.
Uh-huh.
I have decided I want to talk to this woman. I'm reaching out to her. She has no plans of talking to me. She's like a fan of the show, but she's someone I'm interested in. I'm trying to set it up with her for weeks, and for whatever reason, it's not working. The messages aren't going through. All of a sudden, after I see this faceless guy, the messages start to work. And I'm like, okay, cool, well, cool. I'm still not thinking anything of it at the time. I'm going to talk to Becky. I get Becky on the phone. Becky makes these fairy artifacts that look kind of like an excavated fairy skeleton. She's been making them for years. She's made hundreds of them. All she ever makes is fairies with wings. That's all she ever makes. I get her on the phone. We're talking. And she's a big fan of the show, so she's kind of like talking about this Grimble Grumble stuff a little bit. And I'm saying, yeah, before I started to try to talk with you, Becky, I was having all these really weird audio problems. She goes on to talk about how, for the first time ever, this is like all realizations we're having during our conversation, that she's made a gnome. Why did she make a gnome? She shows me a picture of it, this gnome that she's made. It's got the fucking identical walking stick to Grimble Grumble.
Oh, wow.
So Grimble Grumble shows himself to me in the morning, but weeks before, he arrives in a channel to a fairy artist who, for the first time ever in her entire career, makes a gnome for some reason, very intricately goes and gives him this walking stick. And the day before she was talking to me, get this, she's standing in the living room talking to her husband, and they were standing basically in front of the TV with the TV off, just having a conversation in that part of the living room. And while they're talking, they have a Lego dinosaur on top of the television. Mm-hmm. And while they're talking, the Lego dinosaur, like in slow motion, like falls off the top of the TV right into her husband's outstretched hands.
Oh, God.
Who reaches out to catch it because he watches this happening. They both look at each other and they're like, what the hell was that? And she's like, yeah, that was weird. This is happening the night before she goes to talk with me. We get to talking. She tells me about the dinosaur, and then something clicks in her head, and she's like, yeah, and I made a gnome. Why did I make a gnome? And I'm like, you made a gnome because Grimble Grumble has gone through space and time, channeled himself into form, and he tipped over that dinosaur, so you knew he was there, and you knew it was happening. And as I tell that to her, that's my insight. All this like fabric in her crafting room goes exploding out of the box. And it's just been like that. Like, I talked to another fairy artist. She was sitting talking with me about a book she's giving away for the program. She's a macabre fairy artist, so she did like kind of like darker, bones and skulls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're talking, I'm like basically saying to her, like, I really want to pay you for these books. She's like, no, I really love your show. I want to give them away. That's the gist of the conversation. Mm-hmm. We're talking. All of a sudden she starts screaming. I'm like, Brett, are you okay? What's going on? She'd been sitting cross-legged in this spot talking to me, got up to turn around to have a stretch, and there was a clean raccoon skull sitting right behind her.
Oh my God.
I know. The Fae are listening to the show. Grimble Grumble is totally flexing 101 ways, not the least of which is like showing up, moving things, making things appear out of thin air, making people channel him, moving playing cards. Like, it's unbelievable. They're real. And you're right. If you think about it or listen to it too much, careful what you're playing around with, because they kind of know when someone is aware, and that gives them some sort of access. It really does.
Because my kid's dad, Danny, the one who died, when we were still together, he became so obsessed with this stuff. And he is the one person I've dated who the activity around them was insane. Was insane. And I always thought it was because he focused on them so much. But talking to you, listening to you right now, it makes me wonder, like, if a being is multidimensional, if they're pansdimensional, would that make perception and intent tangible to them?
I think yes. Again, I know we're trying to move somewhat towards the conclusion of this conversation.
Oh, I keep on forgetting about that, but yeah.
No worries. I only remind us because I try to keep our talks to around 2 hours for the audience, but it's truly like most of these episodes end up in the 3-hour mark without issue. Look, I don't know about this stuff for sure. I do want to remind you of that, but I have a bit of a privileged perspective because all I do is talk with people about this stuff all the time. I'm going to tell you this as I move towards leaving this conversation here is kind of what I hope will be a good cap on this conversation as a whole. Mitzi, I've had real moments doing this show where I regret that I have started doing this show. Because I feel topsy-turvy, out of control. What the fuck is going on? Shit's moving around my house. My power is going out. My computer is talking to me. My fire alarms are talking to me. I'm having faceless, bloody people show up at my door. there's a point at which I want my logical life back, really. And if it were not for the fact that I'm effectively, beholden to this audience who I've made this promise to that I'm going to keep going, I would have stopped. But I think that enough people are getting value out of this that I probably should keep doing it. Otherwise, the stuff we're talking about inviting this into your life is possibly, once you're aware of it and have gone through the acceptance curve to the point where you're convinced of it, that then becomes the hardest part about this entire topic, is how the fuck do you put this on the shelf along with all the other shit of a day? Where does this contextually fit into what you're supposed to be doing with your life? You know what I mean? It's really, really hard to not get obsessed with it because it's so fascinating and crazy, but it totally can take away from the other stuff that's supposed to be happening in your human life. And, I think nobody that I've spoken to has done a better job of articulating that dichotomy than you. I really want to say that.
Thank you.
I appreciate. No one has. Because sometimes I talk to people who are like, yeah, I'm all about this stuff, and haha, like, this is so funny and cool. Screw all those squares that don't know about it. But I was one of those squares that didn't know about this stuff 5 years ago, basically, right? And to say that this has had a profound change on my life is a joke. It's like, doesn't do it justice. Mm-hmm. And I'm the guy hosting the show and getting all the benefit of like audience and listenership and ego and stuff like that. If you're just Joe Schmo containing in your head the same degree of awareness about this that I'm talking about, and you don't have an outlet like I do, because I have this outlet for this, which is talking to people every week, it is a lot to tangle with alone and solo. So, I do think you've done not only a good job of outlining that challenge, but I think you're a good example of how to put it in place. The thing I'm saying is so hard to achieve. I do think you've done a really good job of that. And I think that's reflected in the way that you're able to openly talk about it here tonight. So thank you very, very much for that, Mitzi.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. On that note, my kid's going to be off his bus in about 10 minutes. So is there anything else you'd like to ask before we finish, before I, hang up?
No. I'll do this. I'll wrap up with some tiny bit of housekeeping and let you have a quick last word. So
okay.
For the audience listening, I'm Jim, and you've been listening to Fascinating Fae. If, like Mitzi, you've got an incredible set of insights, storytelling, and experiences that you'd like to share, you can come on the show by shooting me an email at encounters@fascinatingfae.com, or just shoot me a DM or a message on any of the socials, all of which are found at Fascinating Fae. Finally, I just want to say a super, super big thanks on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners that are tuning in to Fascinating Fae tonight, to Mitzi for coming on the show and being so generous with all of her thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Mitzi, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
It's truly been my pleasure, and out of respect for your time, and because it's really just that time in the show anyway, I'll give you those final words as we go to leave here tonight.
Oh, final words. Keep an open mind. Love yourself. If you have an experience, find an outlet for that, even if that's only writing in a journal. And remember, these memories are fleeting, sometimes on purpose from the Fae, sometimes just because we get caught up in life. You're going to want to read about it later, what you experienced.
Crystal skies are my eyes in an easy way. Horizon blue as the waters play, a tune for those ashore. Sounds of laughter cross the strait to the diving loom, soon to be the rising moon, but like the night before. Graduation came so suddenly. The view is vague from atop the hills we've climbed. And what to see, I don't know what to see. Just another page in time, on a ship or sail with purpose to guide us through the years. Yesterday's tomorrow's now, it's finally coming clear. On a boat adrift to guide us, we're floating past our fears. We don't see no sorrow now, it's true. Memories of days forgone are passing by. We dream beneath the open sky, and we are free. The open ocean whispers songs from lands afar. I travel there with my guitar across the sea. Graduation came so suddenly. The view is vague from atop the hills we've climbed. And what to see, I don't know what to see. Just another page in time, a ship or sail with purpose to guide us through the years. Yesterday's tomorrow's now, it's finally coming clear. On a boat adrift to guide us, we're floating past our fears. We don't see no sorrow now, it's true. A ship or sail with purpose to guide us through the years. Yesterday's tomorrow's now, it's finally coming clear. On a boat adrift to guide us, we're floating past our fears. We don't see no sorrow now, it's true. Don't see no sorrow now, it's true. We don't see no sorrow now, it's true.